Okay, I make sure I did this right. I don't be very professional here, students. You're probably hearing me because, yes, I want to make sure the recording's working. It is. Uh, Again, students, we're in our module now where we're working on really trying to learn what the good practices would be when you're supervising employees. And obviously, most of you know that when you become a school leader, a school administrator, that's one of the new challenges for you that you've not had as a classroom teacher supervising adults. And we're really fortunate today to have the University of West Georgia's general counsel join us. And I would just ask Christy, if she doesn't mind, to go ahead and introduce herself to the class. And you see from the slide here what I've asked her to comment on, and we'll all be interested to hear what she has to offer. So Christy, if you would, please.
Oh, thank you. My name is Kristi Carman. I'm general counsel here at the University of West Georgia. And what that means is I am the lead attorney for any legal issues that come up on campus. I did my undergrad at Michigan State University and my law school was at the University of Georgia. I've been practicing law almost 25 years, and this is my fourth general counsel position. I was general counsel at the Technical College System of Georgia, at Georgia Student Finance Commission, and a private college known as MedTech. So here I am, I'm in my third year, going on fourth year here at the university. So I have a wealth of experience in helping supervisors through the disciplinary process. So I would start by saying that employee discipline at its heart is about informing employees what the expectations are for their positions and educating them as to that. So at its heart, discipline is about making employees successful. So we often talk about there being progressive discipline. And so that's where you start out with some verbal communications. So for example, if you leave your office and you see that your administrative assistant is constantly shopping for shoes on Zappo, you need to talk to that person. So you have a conversation, you say, hey, I know that, a little bit of shopping is okay, a little bit of this is okay, but it's really taking away from your work time. I'd like you to spend more time focusing. And if you don't have anything to do, just let me know, and we'll see if we can find some appropriate projects for you, something that can get you interested. So that's one thing. So you start with a verbal conversation about it. If it continues, you may have to increase your level of engagement. So you would go into maybe a written document where you write up and say, hey, we've talked about this before. I really need you to stop shopping for shoes online during the school day. Please, and then you give some directions. And then from there, you can go to a performance improvement plan, and then ultimately termination if the employee doesn't get in line. There are a couple things about discipline on top of that. So discipline, it's really important that you address items as quickly as you can. So if you think about, this is maybe a terrible example, but if you think about training a puppy, you can't train the puppy, the 30th time it does something wrong, because by then the puppy has assumed that everything they're doing is okay. So if you walk outside your office and you see your assistant online shopping every day for a year, and then you decide to address it, it's going to feel really, the employee is going to view that as really unfair because you've allowed it to go on so long. So you sort of create, that's why I'm saying you need to jump in as quickly as you can. Otherwise, you create an expectation that what they're doing is okay. Another key piece about discipline is you want to deliver discipline in a private office, not in front of the person's peers. Nobody likes to get dressed down in front of their friends. So you would want to do that. I know that one of your projects is going to be to write either a performance improvement plan or a written warning. It's really important that, especially in the performance improvement plan, that you are giving definite and measurable goals. So this gets really difficult when the issue you're having is with a person's quote unquote attitude. because it's really hard to measure kindness. And it's sort of, I think the Supreme Court talks about pornography. They say they know it when they see it.
Yes.
Kindness is sort of, it when you see it, but it's really hard to measure. So if you can do measurable goals, like for instance, if you are having a problem with attitude, you can assign some training modules that you might have access to. I know here at the University of West Georgia, we have a very robust training library that we can dip into, and we could, assign trainings like, how to deal with difficult coworkers, or, just different things to focus on attitude. If you're going to assign something like that, you need to be very clear about your expectations. So I want you to take this course by this date. Don't put in wishy-washy words like reasonable time or anything like that, because those are really hard to enforce later. I think we need to talk a little bit about discipline that doesn't go through the progressive discipline channel. And I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place right now. So Andy, feel free to jump in and direct me.
Let me go ahead and jump in to go recast some of what you already said. Would you agree there's a clear place for the job description as part of this conversation, assuming there is a job description? Doesn't that fit in here in some way?
Absolutely. Job descriptions are a great place to start when you're having the conversation with somebody about what the expectations are. Now, job descriptions tend to be pretty general in nature. So the kinds of coaching that you do will help color in the margins of what the expectations are. So many of our job duties say things like other duties as assigned.
Right.
And so it's those conversations, those coaching conversations that sort of fill in those expectations. And a lot of time job descriptions will say what you're supposed to be doing, but not how you're supposed to be doing it. So they may say you're responsible for trademarks and licensing for the university, but it doesn't tell me exactly how I need to go about doing that and how I manage that area of business. So that's where those coaching conversations come in.
Good. And I think where you were headed, but before you get there, I know every situation's different, policies are different, and maybe the type of job is different, but what would you say a reasonable timeline might generally be for working on somebody toward improvement? You start with the verbal warning, how long are we going to do this dance with an employee before we want to go to maybe it's not working and we want to go to maybe the next step? What would be looked at as this being kind of reasonable effort to let somebody improve?
So sort of the rule of thumb that we use here at the university is on a performance improvement plan, we give at least 3 months. You want to have enough time so that you can show gradual improvement, but you also want to have enough time to see if the person's going to slip back into old habits. So 3 to 6 months is generally speaking, particularly if it's a performance issue, like my online shopping issue, or somebody that's coming in late. Then I think that's a pretty good guideline.
But if we're talking about an issue, which is where I think you were going, and maybe an ethical or criminal or whatever kind of activity, that obviously is a different conversation.
Yeah, there are certain activities that employees can get themselves into that would require a more drastic first step. So if you're arrested for a felony, I'm not going to name the felony. Well, actually, let's have some fun with it. I'll name a felony. This actually happened to me at one of my jobs. Somebody left work, went over to Target on a snack run or something, and shot somebody in the parking lot.
Oh my goodness.
And then came back to work. And we didn't, right. So you find out something like that, that's not something that you're going to go through the progressive discipline process. I mean, that you immediately suspend somebody with or without pay, depending on how your department handles things. And then you watch for the official charges. And then, she was charged with a felony. She did not kill the man. The man survived. So that's good news.
Oh, wow.
So then you terminate once they're charged with a felony. So there are things like that. And that's a really important thing to talk about too, because people think that The only things that can impact them are things they do at work. Those are the only things that can impact their employment. How you behave outside work, and especially outside work, but with your coworkers, can also impact your employment. For example, I had a case a long time ago at corrections, I believe, where a man was charged with sexual harassment because of some of the things he was saying to his coworkers outside of work. So you really do sort of have to mind your P's and Q's. And I think it's interesting to talk to educators about this, because I remember growing up seeing my teachers like at the local restaurant and thinking, how crazy it is that Mrs. Whoever, Mrs. Davenport is here at the restaurant. I kind of thought in my child mind that she only existed at school.
Right.
So you sort of have to be aware that wherever you go, people see you as that representative of the institution that you're serving, particularly if you're outward facing like a teacher or something like that.
And that quickly obviously brings to my mind social media and some kind of behavior, maybe of an employee, a school employee on Facebook or whatever, that could potentially be an employment issue, correct?
Yeah, that can happen. It's really tricky though, because we have to remember, particularly if you are a state employee, you do have some obligations not to just sort of go on social media and vent about your employer, but you do have freedom of speech,
Right.
So I'm really trying, I always try to navigate that place. We have some employees on campus who are fierce advocates for certain causes, and it often puts them in conflict with local politicians. And then the call comes to me about whether what our employee is saying is something that we can take action on.
Right.
And I've had to have some uncomfortable conversations with employees about how to make sure that they are distancing themselves so it doesn't look like it's the UWG stance.
Right.
So for example, I don't have, if you are lucky or unlucky enough to be friends with me on Facebook or something like that, I do not identify myself in my profile as working for the University of West Georgia. Now, I also don't post anything controversial either, but it's really important, if you are a state actor, that you are clear that you're not speaking for your school system, your university, et cetera. So those are tricky.
I know you have a lot of experience, maybe as we start to wind down or have you re-summarize here, but what's probably some of the most common mistake or mistakes that you see supervisors making that you have to come in later maybe and clean up?
So I think we all, and I am not immune from making these mistakes. Let me just be very clear. I think we all like to think that we're nice people, and approaching the disciplinary process can sometimes feel daunting, like, you're going to have to get in conflict with somebody. And I think if we are constantly thinking about the disciplinary process, or just even the supervising relationship, as trying to make people better in their positions, like sort of approach it in a friendlier way, because I think the worst thing I see, and I see it all the time, is people put off addressing issues until they come to me and they're like, I just want to fire them. And I say, well, have you ever talked to them about it? And the answer is usually no, because we're all, a lot of people are conflict avoidant.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the thing. So important to just, set those expectations early and often.
No, that's great advice. I think educators particularly, we get into the profession because you want to help people, and you have generally a kind and nurturing kind of bent and personality. To think about a confrontation with a coworker or whatever, I mean, most of us would do anything we could to avoid that. I think you're right on the point there.
Yeah, it's very, very common.
I think you've laid out a very clear set of comments here for our students, my students, very clear to me. Is there anything you'd like to add or go back and re-emphasize or recast in any way? Because again, I think you've done a really nice job of helping my students kind of see what their role is.
I think we're good. I think, I would just reemphasize early and often, just setting those expectations.
Well, it seemed to me like it only lasted 1 or 2 minutes, but I don't know how long we've been talking, but I greatly appreciate it. The information I think is exactly what is needed and useful for my students. And coming from you, that's a lot more credible than coming from me. And we really appreciate it. I know I speak for all of the students to say thanks so much. And let me hit the stop record here.